So good morning, everyone. It's lovely to see so many of you up early and up for a talk at this point in the fair. I've only been director of Tate for 2 weeks, so I'm very early in my tenure at this extraordinary institution. And it's a great honour for me to be speaking to Annette today. We have not met before organising this event, so this morning was our first face-to-face meeting. But I have known Annette's work as long as I have been looking at art. So for me, it is an extraordinary honour to be asked to do a conversation with you. But we were both saying that the beginning of any conversation, when it has to happen in front of a large crowd of people, can feel very awkward. So I wanted to start with the easiest possible question for Annette. But it's also one that I wanted to ask myself, because I looked to your work, Annette, when I was a young woman, to find an artist role model. And you have been making work since the very early 1970s. So I wondered if you could begin by talking to us about what did it feel to be starting to make work and finding a place in the world in the early 1970s as a woman artist who has some very strong things to say.
Yes, for me at the beginning of the 70s, it was not easy because the art was very minimal and conceptual. And I felt me very different, opposite of this. I wanted to do photos, collage, broderie, a lot of different things. And all my friends said to me, no, Annette, you have to do always the same thing, always the same material. And I feel so different. And I wanted to show that we have one person have very different identities in the same time. So I began to call me Annette Messager collector. So it's, a collector for a woman, it's not so good. Annette Messager, not for Art Basel, I don't have to say that. Annette Messager artist, Annette Messager practical woman, trickster, etc. So this piece, The Borders, this one is a collection of proverbs. It's embroidery. I tried to find proverb about woman, and it was all ugly. So I didn't show the proverb. And I was very, comment on dit, sage comme une image.
Still picture, as nice as a still picture. I wouldn't move.
Because, France is not America, and there is a very strong tradition. And it's not, by example, like Barbara Kruger when she manifests. But I wanted faire un travail plus souterrain.
Yes, I wanted the work not to be so openly raw. Yes, and I wanted to use tradition and disrupt it.
Because the first time I saw this piece, it was, comment on dit, exhibited. The people say, yes, it's true. But it's very strange because there are 200 maybe embroidery. So the number and the repetition and accumulation, it's a part of my work for a lot of.
And the conditions in France in particular, when I look back at your work, in the early 70s, it felt quite hostile. But your first big show was in Germany.
Really? Yes, France is was a very masochist country. I said was. But yeah, my first show was it was very strange in Munich, at Lenbach House, a large show at the beginning of the 70s. And I did a lot of it. It was more open in Germany. And in France, I just met her this morning. Suzanne Paget support me all the time. I did 4 personal shows at the Museum of the Town in Paris, made by with her.
And you saw her. You're staying in a hotel with her at the moment.
Yeah, we took the breakfast too.
Yeah. So that leads me to another question. From then to now, who have been your fellow travellers? Who are the artists and curators who have given you space and supported you?
You know, it's difficult to speak about my influence because for me, by example, the film of Hitchcock were very important with, comment on dit, les gros plans. Les gros plans.
Les gros plans, I'm sorry. The close-ups. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And also the literature, by example, Marguerite Duras and Roland Barthes was very, very important for me, and especially the book Fragment of the Discours Amoureux, Fragment of the... Yeah. And many, many things. The first, comment on dit, speech I did, interview, was with Harold Zeman, just after the documentary, because he came just before his documentary to see my work, and I was very, very shy, and I said to him, I have to go to see my family outside of Paris, because it was not time for me to show him my work. So after that, he said, no, it will be too late for documentary. But it was impossible for me to be in a show like that. I was not prepared with the art world and things.
And, I mean, you have subsequently made a huge impact and have been prepared to put your work in and make very strong political and aesthetic statements. So how did your courage grow?
L'inconscience? No, if you want to do something, you do it. Yeah. It was very simple. Just tenacity.
Yeah, tenacity is a beautiful word, I think.
No, the most beautiful word is desire. If we don't have desire, we die.
Yeah. And desire as a word tumbles down the wall in one of your recent exhibitions. So is desire...
I don't remember.
It's a photograph I was looking at this morning. But
the word with a net,
yes, yeah.
With a net.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's something optimist, desire, and the black net is pessimist.
So that tension,
yeah.
Optimism, pessimism, laughter and horror, that is for me, that is your work. So talk to me about those oppositions fighting in your work.
C'est pas facile. Hein?
It's not easy.
No, because I think the life is like that. You are happy, you go in the street, you see something bad, and you you know, it's always a balance between pessimist and optimist for me. And life is a comedy tragedy all the time. And so I am like that.
So I was looking at the work in Tate's collection that we have.
The Pikes?
Yes, the Pikes. Yes. And again, for me, that was a very important work because it takes the women's broom and turns it into political protest. So, and I find that still very powerful and inspirational. So, talk to me about the relationship between the domestic and the political.
You know, for this series, just before I did the series, my views, and this was hanging with some ropes, a lot of fragment of the body, of photography. It was no more man and woman, it was mixed together. And just I have enough with, I wanted to do something just after more plus je sais pas quoi. Plus agressif, maybe.
More aggressive?
Plus. And, you know, in France, we have a lot of manifestation, political demonstration. And we did the French Revolution with the pack and the heads of the people. Not good, but... And so it's like they are waiting, the packs who are waiting to go in the street and to manifest. And it was not your question, I think so.
No, carry on.
For women? Je sais pas. No, but you know, now it's, I can say it's different because, of course, I am older and I have not to find identity or my identity, but I am a citizen. And it's so awful what you can see now in the world, and you have in England Brexit, and you have etc. So I ask me a lot of questions about the place today of the artist. I don't like political art, but I think always art is political. But today, by example, of course, you know the painting of Nicolas Poussin, Le Massacre des Innocents, the massacre.
Massacre of the Innocents by Nicolas Poussin.
And unfortunately, it's really from today, this painting. And they asked me to do Monsieur Rosenberg from le Louvre and le Musée Picasso, because Picasso did Guernica after it was very influenced by Poussin, by this painting, and also Bacon, because it's very strange. Bacon was living, he was young, he was living, this painting is in Chantilly. I never been there. And Bacon was living there to learn French, maybe with a lover. And he saw this painting, and he didn't know, he was not sure to be an artist. And when he showed this painting, he did the first painting, Le Cri, the cry. Because this painting is the first cry. And also it's the woman is like a white mask, the mother. And you know, especially in England, it's the same. You know, it's exactly what the terrorists did some weeks ago. So I think it will change for the artist today, the place of the artist.
I think we live in times that are very divided, and I'm wondering myself how the artist finds a space when so much of the world is in vicious opposition.
Yeah, but except because Picasso, because nobody today will know Guernica if Picasso didn't do this painting. It's incroyable.
So when, in your recent show in London, there is work that makes reference to other feminist actions. So you see the Femen, and so are you making visible, is that an important issue for you?
J'ai pas entendu. I saw Suzanne Paget and
Did you?
Yes, she talked me a lot. No, because the feminine, the feminine they wrote in the body, in their breast. For me, they show a new feminist. The women today are free, they are beautiful, and they are not, and so they want to show her very happy. They contest a lot, and it's some kind of they are insolent.
Yeah. Yes, that's brilliant. I was thinking of the word exuberant.
Yeah.
They refuse to be confined, my daughter is just 18, and her generation.
Yes.
Her generation seems to me to refuse easy positions. Men, women, straight, gay. They say. She goes, "Why are you talking about these old things?" And that becomes political. They are exceeding the positions that we were allowed to have. So how do you feel as an artist who has been making work for more than 40 years? How do you position yourself in relation to these new generations of women and men?
Moi, je me positionne pas du tout.
I do not position myself at all.
No, I'm free. I want to do what I want, and I'm looking a lot of I love a newspaper and paper, and to look of, and also today my work was changing a lot with the internet, because you have so much information. And by example, I did a piece. I was in an airport and I saw a lot of interdiction, comment on dit, prohibition. Everywhere I come back in Paris, and I saw prohibition. By, of course, in the museum. Of course, here you enter, and you have all is prohibited today. So I was looking to the panel on internet, and you have so much prohibition in all the words. So I did a piece.
Yes,
maybe you saw it in London. This piece, les interdictions. And so I am looking a lot. By example, I did a piece, le crash test, because tout est faux.
Everything is fake.
Everything is fake in crash test. The car are destroyed. It's not human, but it's robot inside. So I did a piece maybe 2 or 3 years ago about that. So for me, the information is in the street, in the newspaper, in the computer. For me, it's the same. At the beginning, I did work with some kind of material from, very simple material from you have at home, but paper, photography, fabrics. And also you have all the magazine and the newspaper coming at home. And now you have internet and all this information, fake, and
it's the stuff of daily life.
yes,
But
yes.
coming now from all over the world, all sorts of sources.
It's awful so for art, because you want to see the work of an artist, you have to put the name, and you saw painting, but it's not the reality. But sometimes, especially at Tate, it's so well done. So you can see all the show in your computer. But it's not the same, of course.
I like to think that seeing it on the computer, this is what I hope, only encourages stepping into the building.
Yeah.
Because on the computer, it doesn't hit you in the stomach or the heart so much.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think actually we are seeing a time where people are wanting again to gather, to come together, to see things.
Yes, by example, the book by ordinateur, it's not
The e-book.
The e-book, it's not so well now. They buy less and less. People prefer real books.
But it is that you're right that we might sit on the airplane reading our Kindle.
Yeah.
But actually, people are also returning to beautifully designed books with lovely covers as objects that are full of desire for them. So we're living between the digital and the tactile, I think. So with that, I have a question that I always like to ask an artist that I haven't been able to spend time with. And I think it's a very good question for you, because you take on different identities. So on a normal morning, what does Annette Messager do? What do you do first in the morning?
Look, a cigarette.
Perfect. So cigarette, and then what happens?
I'm going to the cafe outside.
And coffee or tea?
Café, espresso, and a newspaper, Le Parisien.
Ah.
It's not a good newspaper, but we have, there are some, it's a very little, it's outside of Paris, in the suburb, and it's very, very funny because there are a lot of Arabic people there, and it's Ramadan today, now, and there is Italian, African, it's a little cafe with
the world sitting there.
Yes. And we speak about news, and sometimes it's difficult about politics in France with the election. And
so some political debate over coffee.
Where I am living is still communist.
I think
it's very rare.
Unusual. Yeah.
Yes.
So after the coffee and discussion, do you go to the studio? Do you go?
Oui.
Yeah. So in the studio, how long? What do you do?
C'est un secret.
That's a secret.
Reprends une cigarette.
Yeah. Very good.
I smoke another one.
Et après, je vous dirai pas.
And then I will not tell you.
Because I don't know, I dance with my things, I take something, and je sais pas.
Yeah.
I feel.
It's hard to tell.
I don't want to tell.
No.
That's
and
different.
I don't want to tell.
Indeed. So we've had two things then that I think are very important for your work. Is the secret. At the end of the little film you made for Tate, you said it was a secret how old you were.
Moi?
Yeah.
No.
a secret.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
It was a mistake.
Yeah.
I said.
But secrets and laughter, I would say.
No, but if we don't have humor, the life is awful.
Laughter is...
Because we know where we are going, all of us.
But for me, when I was 18, Elan Sigsu's book, The Laugh of the Medusa, was translated into English. It is still a terrible thing for me that my school didn't teach me French. So I was never able to read it in French. But still, the power of that book and the power of laughter as a revolutionary act was very, very influential for me. And so I wanted to ask you about mischief and laughter in your work, because to me they feel important things, serious things.
Yes, of course, because as you say, I said life is a comedy and tragedy, and we are together in the same time. We are happy, we are not happy, and I don't know. I'm happy to do my work. I can say I'm happy to be an artist, and if I will be not an artist, I was an awful person, and je ne sais pas ce que je serais devenue. Mais the life is difficult for everybody, and especially today, you know, with all in the street, and we are afraid all the time. We are afraid to take the subway. We are afraid to just to walk and to look at the sun and to the flowers. It could arrive something. So it's more and more opposition between le rire et les larmes. Le rire et so,
between laughter and tears.
Mais c'est notre quotidien aujourd'hui. It's our daily life. So it's in my work, of course. I don't know. Ça vient.
Yeah. And over the decades, do you feel there is a fundamental shift then?
Maybe in 2000, I began to work with mechanical object and with a computer, and so it was important because maybe older and older I am, I want to move, I want to walk, I want to dance, I want to... Voilà, peut-être c'est la conséquence.
Maybe that's a consequence.
And when I began to work with some movement, some little, I said puppets, but some little puppets in fabric, and it was for a documentaire, je ne sais plus laquelle. I didn't know anything about computer and motors and so what. And the first piece was with 40 motors. It was crazy to begin with 40 motors and computer. But at the same time, it was a story about the mad cow. Do you remember?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And so I did some cow. By example, we said my cow. We have to say my beef. But we know, je sais pas pourquoi.
Yes, why do we say mad cow instead of mad beef?
It is. I completely agree. Very strange.
I bought a little sculpture of Rodin in the museum, awful sculpture of Le Penseur. You know,
the thinker.
To do something. And the word in French, la penseuse, it doesn't exist. Penseur in féminin. Mm.
Yes. the male thinker, la penseuse, doesn't exist.
n'y a pas de penseuse ici.
No female thinker, only male thinkers.
So that is a big weight of language to be fighting against as a woman artist.
And with Suzanne Paget, we did a show at Venice at the Biennale Casino about Pinocchio. It's a little boy of Pantin I like a lot.
I was remembering that because it was an extraordinary installation and obviously won the Golden Lion. And then in this year's Venice, there is another Pinocchio story by the artist Rachel McLean. And interestingly, her Pinocchio is picking up on things that you have just been talking about fake news and the lies that we tell. And so the figure of Pinocchio is serving you and then...
serves the artist.
Yeah.
Because Pinocchio is an artist. He didn't want to go at school, he didn't want to work, he didn't want to be in an office, he wanted to be free and to discover the world. And for this, it was some kind of voyage initiatic.
Initiatic journey.
The life of Pinocchio. And at this Biennale, I did some kind of, comment on dit, un accouchement, birth.
It's like giving birth.
He was eating by a wharf in Balen.
Yeah.
And he met there his father, and his father was very poor, you know, because his father was a menuisier.
Craftsman and a wooden
in fact,
craftsman.
he was a sculptor, his father. So that's the reason he did Pinocchio just in wood. And his father said, I am so well there because the wharf eat books, fish. I have all inside. I never had in my life. But after that, after 2-3 days, Pinocchio said, we cannot stay here, we have to. And it was after that they left, and it's like a birth.
Out of the belly of the whale.
Yeah. And for the father of Pinocchio, Geppetto, so this culture become human. So for artists, it's fantastic.
So, and it's love that makes him human, is it? So it's back to desire.
And he has no mother. He always tried to find his mother.
Yeah. So you don't have to answer this question if it's an area you are not interested in, but you have just talked about fathers and mothers and births and the psychoanalysis. How important is psychoanalysis?
I don't want to say. I don't want to know that. No. It's
just it's there.
Oui.
Yeah. That's
because
fine.
I think it's easy, because a lot of people ask me, and a psychanalyst wrote a text on me, but she didn't give me the text. She said, no, you have not to read that. It's another point of view.
Yeah. And one of the other things that that I didn't want us to talk about, but we are sort of talking about,
Oui.
nevertheless, is the issue of being a woman. So we were laughing when we were talking on the telephone. There's been a lot of comment about the fact that I am the first woman director of Tate, and you are always a woman artist. And I want to say in 2017, thank you, and congratulations to you. Maybe when can we stop talking about being a woman something? It's 2017.
Never. Je crois.
I think we have to have a new campaign about it, making it the new normal.
Maybe with your daughter.
Yes, by the time we get there. So, but I feel I've been waiting a very long time already. But so instead,
but fighting is good too.
Yes, and yeah,
important.
And I feel that you and me in my position, I am all the time saying, I'm just a director. I'm Maria, and I'm also saying at the same time it's really important now that it's a woman, and I want both things.
But you have to work the double, I am sure.
Yeah, I think we. But that's why the trickster, the handiwork. Well, that's where all of those persona are so important.
Yeah. Thank you.
And you refuse to be one identity.
Oui.
Yeah. So
my name is Messager.
Yeah.
So a lot of message.
Yes. Yeah, that can be interpreted in many ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. I don't want to ask you about the other women artists that that you see as influential on you. Tell me about
Eva S. was very important for me. She's a very, very great artist. Mm-hmm. Because in the same time her work is minimalist and also sentimental. Sentimental, ça se dit. Sentimental. Mm-hmm. And she combined this together, and with the materials, and for me, she died very, very young, but the work was very, very important. Still important.
Yeah, and artists from other disciplines, writers, makers.
Marguerite Duras, of course, Virginia Woolf, of course.
And I also wondered, I always think about surrealism in relation to your work. So you're situated alongside but not part of many other art movements. And how do you feel about that relationship?
You know, at the beginning, in the 70s, I was a friend with people like Robert Filiou. It was more Dadaist than Surrealism. And Surrealism in France was a little bit too heavy, you know. And André Breton, you know, Le Père, the God, we want to destroy it. But I love a book, it was very important, the book Nadja, he wrote, with photography, and these photography are nothing, you know, the street in Paris, and very simple, very normal photography, and it was an important book for me, because all the text and photos together, to mix them together, because in fact I wanted to be a writer, but I cannot write because you have to stay on the table and a chair, and I have to move all the time. And so maybe I just take some words. I love words, I love rumor, incantation, and the views, also the visual of the words. I love words.
And to me, the words in your work are objects to wrestle with.
Yeah, and also the titles are important. Yes. If I have no title for a piece, ça va pas. Ça va pas.
There's something wrong.
Yeah.
But sometimes I have the title before. What can I do with this? It's like you with, I have an answer, but I have no question.
But that's very useful sometimes.
Yeah. To
start
yes,
where
yes.
you wish to end
oui.
is a good process.
Trame. Oui.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, that starts to unlock some of the secrets that happen in the studio.
The petit secret, yes, yes.
Little secrets, yes.
Yeah. So you are making work as actively in 2017 as you were in 1974. That's a very long, 45 more years. What has time taught you?
Rien.
Nothing.
Nothing. It's always a new situation and new day and new news, and so I said I am working about. It was the first commande. Une commande.
First order, yeah.
I have in my life about le massacre des innocents de Poussin.
Massacre of Innocent.
Because unfortunately it's so from today, from actuality. And so I say, yes, okay, I will try to do something. But 4 months ago, I didn't know. I will try to do a piece from Le Massacre des Innocents de Poussin. And for me, it's strange, because I did some work working with theater and scenography or things like that. But to begin with another artist like Poussin, I was so afraid, but c'est urgent.
Yes, it was urgent to do it.
My good friend Hans-Ulrich Obrist says urgent is one of the most important words.
Maybe.
Yeah. So, which Annette is coming out of that urgency in 2017? Which version, which persona is at the forefront?
Annette Messager, fumeuse.
Smoker one.
Yeah. But
because I smoke more and more when I saw the news and.
But that is a quite difficult position. You know, in England, in America now, almost impossible to smoke anywhere.
On peut trouver.
Can always find.
Oui.
Here in Switzerland, it's much easier. And in France, obviously. Mm. So we must always create the space for the artists to be able to smoke.
No, they have to go to the other person, not to be separate. No. It's not good to be separate.
Right.
Yeah, here at the art fair, we are a little bit outside of the world.
It's
another world.
Yeah. So you were talking about this before we came onto the stage. How does the artist feel in the art fair?
Very bad. No, it's not the place of the artist to see marchandises like this. Of course, there are very interesting things, but voilà, c'est difficile.
Hard to see them as products for sale.
Yeah. But increasingly, the art fairs want to make sure that the artist is present. That's why you're here this morning.
Ah oui?
Yeah. So does that feel awkward?
Oui, c'est bizarre.
It is awkward.
But I think you have an audience that is here for you, perhaps more than for the fair.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. Oh,
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Now, I think at this point, it's our cue to turn to the audience, because we have a lovely crowd of people who have been really keen to hear from you. So I'd like us now to be able to take some questions from them. Is that okay with you? Yeah. So can I turn to you as an audience? And we have about half an hour where we can take questions from you and we can decide whether we need translation or not. But can you put up your hand if you'd like to ask a question and wait for the microphone so that we can hear you properly, and then we'll take answers as they come. So who would like to go first? Over here. And tell us who you are.
I'm Kathy from London. Hello. Annette, I've been following your work. I also have a very early work of yours, so I'm totally thrilled to be listening to what you have to say. Thank you for coming. What I wanted to understand is you mentioned Poussin, you've mentioned Picasso, you've mentioned Dadaism. You also mentioned that you don't particularly like coming here to look at art as merchandise. But I wondered if you have particular artists now that you follow as a fellow artist, and if you interact with these younger artists in your life today.
By example, we were speaking about the difficulty at the beginning to be, and always to be a woman artist. But by example, in France, the two artists important in the art world are Tatiana Trouvé, Camille Henrault. It's women, so it's changing a lot. And of course, I'm not going a lot in the gallery. I can, except the gallery, my gallery, Marianne Goodman gallery. But I saw shows in museum and etc. And I am working. I was teacher during a long time, and I work with young artists. They are artists, they are assistant. So we spoke a lot together. So I can see 5 years ago, these young people were not engaged in political. They don't care about that. And today it's completely different. They vote, and so it's changing. The relation between art and life and political. Today it's changing.
And Annette, could you say a little bit more about the role of the artist as teacher in your own life?
Je ne sais pas si j'ai eu un rôle... je ne sais pas, I don't know. Mais je sais que j'ai essayé de transmettre mon enthousiasme, pour moi, quand je n'ai petite fille, j'étais très catholique, je voyais Dieu partout, enfin une sorte de mysticisme débile. And now I have no more religion. I'm completely athei. But my religion is art. It's stupid, but it's like that. I don't understand, by example, when I see a painting of Paul Klee with 3 colors, I find that fantastic. Je ne comprends pas. Je ne comprends pas comme une religion, je ne comprends pas. Parce que pour moi, qu'est-ce que l'art? What is art? Maybe it's emotion, that's all. So I try to excusez-moi, je suis fatiguée, de transmettre cette émotion.
Well, I don't know what my role is as a teacher, really. I don't think I have any role, but maybe convey desire and enthusiasm to my pupils. You know, when I was a little girl, I was brought up very Catholic, and I believed in all that silly things they had and stupid mysticism. Well, now as an adult, I became an atheist. I'm completely atheist now, but you know, it's just like in art, it's maybe like in religion, it has to do with feelings and not with understanding. You know, religion, I never understood anything at religion. And when I see an art like a Paul Klee painting, I see these three colors, I just see, you know, something, I don't understand it, but I feel it, and maybe that's what art is all about. What is art all about? Maybe just feelings, and that's what I'm trying to pass on to my students.
Got another question here at the front.
Hello, my name is Catherine. I'm a Swiss artist living in France and a big fan of your work and your personality. And you just said before something about terrorism. You thought that now the place of the artist will change with terrorism. Can you tell us more about that? Do you think it will change in contents, in position, or in what way will it change now?
No, I don't think it will change, but it's a question. By example, Matisse, his daughter was a resistant during the war, and she was arrested. And when she was arrested, the day where she was arrested, he painted flowers, bouquet of flowers. So it's maybe an answer, maybe to do art more happy, funny, happy to be in life, or the opposite. You know, I don't know today how it will change or not change. I'm sure it will be something different today for everybody in the life, in the daily life, and for the artist too.
I was, the day that I left Manchester, where I have been for 11 years, there was the bomb at the Ariana Grande concert. And a concert full of really young people. And I have been struck that the whole city has done exactly as you are suggesting, that there has been a response which is about optimism. So Ariana came back and staged a huge concert to refuse to accept the fear.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there has been grieving across the city and the laying of flowers and silence. And I've been humbled, I think, by the capacity for both. And I think that they are the times that we're in.
Yeah, but it's beautiful to react like that. Because the most important thing is the life, our life, the life.
And it refuses one opposition, one thing opposed to the other. It says it is possible to be both.
You know, 2 years ago, I'm born near Calais. And so very important, when I was a young girl, I saw the sculpture of Rodin, Les Bourgeois de Calais. And I was shocked by this sculpture. And I'm always shocked by this sculpture. And so they asked me to do a show there in Calais. And as you know, it was, and it's still complicated for the migrant to go to England. And I was in two places, in two different museums in Calais. And I didn't know if I will do it or not. And I say, I have to do it. Because for people, not for the migrant, but maybe for one migrant, But for people in this town, it's so awful. They have to see art and to react. And it was the most complicated show for me to do, more complicated than in London. Because, you know, on est trop humble. Moi, je suis une privilégiée de faire ce que je veux dans la vie. Donc, c'était difficile de me situer par rapport à cette ville en détresse.
One feels very much humbled when one sees this, because I am, as an artist, I'm a privileged person, and it was very hard to see a city in such distress as Calais.
Mais au contraire, je croyais qu'il fallait la faire.
But on the contrary, that's why I thought I had to do it.
Yes. Many of my colleagues in arts organisations in the UK also felt they had to go. So there was theatre groups and visual artists and dancers who went to make work in the jungle, in the camps there. And on the one hand, that is, so what can art do? Actually, the answer is a lot, because it must be there. Mm-hmm. And they felt impelled. And I think it's very important. What you made, the show you made there, is very important. So we should take another question at this point. Have we got somebody else from the audience that would like to ask a question? In the middle there, thank you.
Hi, my name's David. I'm from Manchester. I teach at a university in Manchester. And a lot of my students are really inspired by your work. And I was wondering if you had a kind of a message of inspiration for the students that I could pass on to them.
They have to find leur propre chemin.
They have to find their own way, their own pathway.
It's not important at school. They copy the other artists. It's better to copy when you are at school than after. So they have to find the way where they are going.
Cool. I'll let them know. Thank you.
And copy.
Another question? Oh, could we take white T-shirt first and then the person behind afterwards?
Elsa Frangos from Australia. I wanted to ask you about smoking. It's related to anxiety and anger many people associate with the emotion of smoking. So is this perhaps, as it's increased in your life, one of your little secrets? Does anxiety and anger encourage you to make work?
If I don't smoke, I have no idea. My idea are coming from a cigarette. Je suis sûre.
I'm convinced with that.
Yeah, you know, it's not only to smoke, but to take a cigarette, to like baby with a mother, the suction. It's important.
And the question of anxiety, does anxiety drive you?
Oui, mais l'anxiété doit être arrêtée aussi, canalisée un peu.
Yes, but anxiety must be also stopped or channeled somehow.
Si on est trop énervé, on peut pas. Maybe to do drawings, because it's so simple to make a drawing, you know, you can go directly and quickly, and after that, fini. With the drawing, it's different. For me, it's like haiku, you know. It's so simple, and it's very difficult to do something simple.
It's the hardest.
Yes, yes. But with nobody, just a cigarette, paper, and ink, c'est fantastique.
So I think the other thing is that it is very difficult to make things look effortless.
Oui.
And the hard work is to make it look.
Bien sûr, bien sûr. It's a lot of work to do that, especially when you have a show in a museum. It seems to be so simple, one piece and one piece. And for this, you have plan, you work a lot, and you have so many. Yes.
Yeah. Our job is to
Yes.
make all of that disappear for the artist so that it is all there.
But it's the same for the galleries. And for that, Marianne Goodman is a very good gallery.
Yeah. Excellent. I'm pleased to hear that. Should we take the next question? Our person behind.
Hello, my name is Lala. I'm from Syria. I wanted to ask you, hello. How can artists have a positive role in a time of war? I heard about how to be optimistic, but how important it is as well to try to express how people are living or how people feel in now in all the world, but specifically like in a country like Syria, for example, because no one can imagine that maybe artists can have a role to express how people feel through art. So how do you think they can have a positive role in a time like this? Thank you.
C'est ce que je disais, c'est vraiment les questions que je me pose aujourd'hui, sans réponse d'ailleurs. Je suis sûre que les artistes sont importants, mais je ne sais pas pourquoi, mais je ne sais pas dire. C'est vraiment des questions importantes aujourd'hui et sans réponse.
That's what I said earlier, you know, that's the questions I was asking myself nowadays. And I'm afraid I don't have the answer to it, you know. I know that art is important and that the artist has to work and to express something, but why? Why is it important? What can bring? I don't have the answer to that.
Mais les artistes sont des citoyens aussi.
But don't forget that artists are citizens themselves as well.
Et c'est à tous les citoyens de réagir.
And all citizens are to react, not just artists.
Et je n'ai pas de réponse.
But I'm afraid I don't have any answer.
Can we have another question? Just over here.
Hi, I'm from China, and I'm currently working at a museum in Beijing. And I visited lots of female artists in the beginning of the year because we want to do visual art exchange, feminist visual art exchange with actually with Tate Plus. So, and when I visit those feminist artists, I find some feminist artists really want to join this project, but some of them are not really want to join this project because they want to weaken the title of feminist, because they think the best way to support a woman artist, how do you say, to support the feminists is weaken that word. So I'm not sure, but you know, like there has to be a platform to let them speak. I understand, but if it's you, what do you think is the best way to express yourself, to support feminists? Sorry, my English is not that well.
You know, I don't like the show only with a woman artist, because I think it's a new ghetto and it could be dangerous. And I like to make show with good artists, female and male, but it's very dangerous to say you're feminist and woman, and we have really to take care about that, to have a category like black artist, Jewish artist, and you know, it's like the toilet, it's a man, woman, and comment? Non, et les hommes et les femmes, les comment? Les trans, c'est très dangereux, c'est toutes ces catégories, et on doit être dans la vie. Dans la vie, c'est composé d'hommes et de femmes, et on doit se battre au milieu de ça.
Yes, all these categories are really dangerous. You know, you're a man, you're a woman, you're trans, you're this, you're that. And it's really dangerous, and we should actually fight that, falling into categories all the time.
This is just, you know, because...
You mean are there few women artists or feminists?
No, because in China, people don't want to speak that word because they suffer their lives when they were born, you know. Only higher educated women know that word, but very less women in China even know that word, because they face to the destiny when they were born. To in a certain age, they have to get married and take the responsible for the families rather than have their own career. So what we think is right things to do is we raise up this subject to remind all the woman was born in China, is born in China, to let them know this word, to let them to express. To let them know, like, we have a better living. We can have a better living life. So even I understand that it's very dangerous, but someone have to speak it out in China at current stage. So that's what I'm thinking about. I hope you can say something to the woman artist or the woman in China. So I think they become stronger and stronger, but they have to get support from the international side.
It's not about art, it's about the life and the politics of the country. Because this old woman, it's not the work of the artist, it's the work of the education of the country.
And I think what you're talking about gets to a very important dilemma that hasn't even gone away in France or in the UK or the US. So to claim feminist as a word is important to raise a political question, and you are talking about consciousness raising, to use the term from the 1970s in Europe. But at Tate now, Francis Morris, leading Tate modern, wants 50% men and women artists on display. Not because that's a feminist idea, but because it is reflecting the world of artists who are making work in the 20th and 21st century. So we don't want to talk about men, women, black, white, trans. We want to talk about the diversity of practice that we see in the world. With my other hand, I want to say, and yes, it is still important that we notice, somehow the word is still not equal. It's not equal when you look at the artists who are displayed in exhibitions across America or Europe. It still tends to be 70 to 75% male artists and 25% female artists. If you look at market prices, male artists are much higher than women artists. And it is changing. And we must refuse the categories. But like Annette's work, we've got to say both something political and something that is just, this is the art and this is the life and the world that we wish for. So it's very, I am a woman director, I'm a director. You are an artist and you are a woman artist. Both are important. It's complicated, and I think it shouldn't still be like this. But the world we live in still is quite unequal. Is there another question after that? I have only one last question for you, Annette, which is there anything that you would like to say that I haven't asked you?
I'm looking for it and I can't find it.
Well, with that, is there some no? I would say a gesture of connection there. I think our only thing left to do is to give huge thanks to you, Annette.